All right, guys, welcome to my fourth attempt at streaming tonight. Hopefully it works this time because if the echo comes back or whatever, I'm just done until tomorrow. I'll try to fix it, but hopefully we're all good now. Let me know in the comments if there's still echo, and if so, I will just delete myself from from social media forever or something. But we are going to talk about higher self, and that is really the objective of all of the systems of magic and spirituality, philosophy. Even a lot of the different schools of philosophy are all about self-knowledge and self-awareness. And there is a deeper level. Okay, good to hear that the sound is okay. There's a deeper level to this that nobody really knows exactly what the answer is to. It's something that I've experienced throughout my life. It's really just in the last couple of years that I've really been forced to accept that whatever the holy guardian angel is, as Aleister Crowley referred to it, or the higher self, I've always had a dialogue with that part of myself, or whatever that is. From the time that I was a small child, I got advice from this voice in my head, I guess, that now as an adult I realize couldn't possibly have come from me. It didn't come from my environment. There's no chance of those things. And I am in no way proud, because my entire life I have fought and failed this voice at every turn. And that's something we're going to discuss as well, because, I always make this analogy, but you don't want to be like the sorcerer's apprentice and end up with too much enthusiasm that isn't tempered by wisdom and experience. And a proper understanding of magic, if you're going down that road, is also really important. That was a big problem with me. I wasn't realistic about the limitations of this kind of thing. And also, I think when you realize that you have sort of aligned yourself with a sort of preternatural consciousness, or you've accessed a greater field of information, you can get a little bit cocky and, overconfident as well. So I'm going to offer everything I can to assist you guys in understanding what this phenomena can be, and also how to avail yourselves of it in ways that are productive and safe, So let's go back to the idea of, or the question of, what is the higher self? What is the holy guardian angel? If you go back to ancient Greece and you were to ask Pythagoras or Aristotle or Plato, they would say that it is your personal daemon. Daemon, of course, is a word that has come to represent, evil forces. But back then, the word dominion, for example, comes from the idea of daimonion, which was the rule of the spirit over the material. And so it used to actually have a very positive inflection to it. And it was often also sort of interchangeably spoken about as genius. Your genius was sort of like your personal daemon that would guide you. And the higher self was also kind of thought of as the totality of consciousness, sort of like the Godhead, the anthropos, it was called in Greek. And so, the objective is to make contact with this aspect of self. And that can be done through a tremendous number of different roads. Obviously psychedelics are a very good tool for this. In fact, Jung, who is an invaluable agent in the dispensation of higher consciousness, in my opinion, he defined the self as that which is produced by the interaction of the conscious and the subconscious. And that reminds me of another idea from the occult that tells us that it's the two opposing poles of the electromagnetic wave, the interaction of them, that gives rise to a third field or a third thing, and that thing is consciousness. So we have these two opposite poles interacting, cosine, sine, and their vector where they meet produces our consciousness. It's also interesting to note that we have two eyes here and a third one here that produce an equilateral triangle, 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 666. All of these really central occult symbols actually relate back to all of this stuff. So lots of interesting stuff to note, but this alchemical secret of, the interaction of opposites and opposing forces producing a third thing of a higher nature, that is very much reminiscent of Jung's interpretation of the self. And so, the question then is, what was that voice that I was interacting with as a child? And just to give you a couple of bits of, examples of the type of information it would give me, I was maybe 6 years old or something, and I was in my bedroom. I think I was like putting clothes away or something mundane, and suddenly that voice was like, you need to stay away from cocaine, and you should use psychedelics because they will be a tremendous help to you. But don't touch pills, because if you do, you're going to become addicted to them and you're going to lose many years of your life. All of that was true. All of that happened. And there's no reason that I would have known that at that young of an age. It's true that I was surrounded by white trash, but that was mostly in my neighborhood and outside of my home. And I wasn't really exposed to any kind of information about that kind of stuff so early on, And so I guess it kind of begs the question, assuming that this phenomena is real, what is it? Is it ourselves projected into the future, or perfected in the future, transmitting this information back to us? Physics even suggests to us that time is not linear. So we would have, in that case, a transtemporal identity. All of our past selves would also still exist in the past. The totality of time and space is omnipresent. And so, I find that to be a pretty interesting possibility, but then I can't imagine our future selves sitting around transmitting information back to our past selves as if we have nothing better to do in infinite time and space. So, it's a really interesting question. What exactly is the holy guardian angel? What exactly is the higher self? And I think that that's one of those things that we just may never answer. The important thing is that we develop the skill set to have access to it, the humility to keep ourselves out of trouble once that happens, and the wisdom to be able to distinguish between legitimate input and information from our higher self, as opposed to wish demons and, egoic fantasies and all of that sort of thing. And that, as Aleister Crowley said, the number one mistake that the magician makes is to think that his magic can do more for him than it can. So, having that humility and developing that wisdom is one of the central things of importance if you're going to set out on this path. And so the path itself, it's a strange thing to me that some people seem to have an innate connection with this sort of thing, like myself. I have never had to question what my purpose was. I have always sort of been compelled to act upon certain lines. And it's not like this is something that I put myself on a pedestal over, because, everything has a way of balancing itself out. And I don't know what I was watching, but I saw a guy today talking. He was having his spiritual awakening, and he was talking about his reversal of values. And it occurred to me that I had always had that reversal that he was talking about. And he was, kind of almost disturbed by it. Like, it was just so devastating to be uprooted and sort of taken from your comfortable couch watching CNN or Fox News and tossed into a gale storm at high winds, sort of thing. And I realized that for myself, it was kind of the opposite, because I've always had, this complete and total investment in metaphysics and the mysteries and the dispensation of, consciousness to other people. It's just, I'm sort of just compelled to do that. But almost nothing else has any value at all. And, it's, of course, made it difficult for me to navigate the normal world because I never had that value. I never had that idea that your self-worth and your dignity is based on how much money you have or any of that stuff. I've never had any relationship to any of that. So the thing that must be done is, to establish balance if you didn't have it in the first place, or to make sure that you maintain it throughout this process. Because in my opinion, one of the most important motivating factors for pursuing this kind of holistic self and this self-knowledge and this connection to our genius and our holy guardian angel is that the world needs us to revolutionize ourselves, right? We're not just doing this for ourselves. We're doing this, well, we are. That's an interesting one. We think of collective self-service as self-denial. And if you really think about it, that doesn't make sense either. If you are really functionally serving the collective, unless you have somehow managed to extricate yourself from that collective, you are part of it. So collective service is self-service. I think that's one of the great lessons that I'm here to promote is that, we have been deliberately indoctrinated to believe that it's one or the other. In order to keep us within certain strictures, within certain political parameters in our thinking. And obviously, that's not working out too well. Let me check the chat real quick. By the way, you guys, I'm in the process of, because these streams, I do them off the top of my head. I'm well aware that it's not always totally organized. But I am feeding them into ChatGPT and asking it to organize them. And then I'm putting it into blog form and then compiling that into a book. So there's a WordPress in the description if you're interested in seeing a more coherent, fully realized version of the kind of stuff I talk about in these podcasts. That's going to be available there day by day. Also, you can find all kinds of links to buy plant medicine products. And also, you can go to junglegnosis.com and book consultations. And here, I'll put that in and get plant medicine stuff and Shipibo clothing and all sorts of interesting products. And so, the individuation process as a collective, right? This is another way that I put this the other day is that, in the occult, in several different schools of the occult, we have this idea of the macroprosopis, or the Adam Kadmon, the universal mind, this greater consciousness of which each of us is a part and piece, part and parcel, even. And I think when we realize that we need to heal ourselves, we speak about becoming whole again, right? As if we are... the different pieces of our psyche have been fragmented and tossed around. And so our job is to reassemble them and become whole again, right? Well, each of us is also a piece of this collective mind, and we must reassemble the collective psyche. Or even possibly what we're doing is assembling it for the first time, which is kind of an interesting thought that, the universe and consciousness evolution is actually moving somewhere. It's going somewhere. And the archaic revival that Terence McKenna talked about is not necessarily just circling back. It's circling back, but going forward at the same time. You can think of it like the Fibonacci sequence that goes back a number, copies and then moves forward, and goes back and copies and moves forward. Everything in the universe moves according to that sort of cycle. So I want to take a little bit of a deviation here to talk about genius in general, because that is actually something that, the ancient Greeks sort of equated with this higher self. And there are different schools of thought about this, and I think that's because there are different versions of genius. There are people that have astronomically high IQs, and they are just always super intelligent, and breaking the mold, and they're Albert Einstein, and they're oh man, I wish I could remember this guy's name. There's the guy with the world. Just YouTube. The guy with the world's highest IQ right now, because he thinks a lot like I do, but his IQ is much higher. So it's really interesting to listen to him talk about this stuff. But the other idea is that we actually can sort of deactivate the filtration system in our consciousness through breath work and psychedelics and other sorts of disciplines and traditions. And access the universal mind or a greater mind. And in that way, I think every single person is capable of genius. You know, I hate to come so close to sounding like a braggart, and I'm definitely flirting with it with this, but you know, I've noticed in my own life that I'm definitely not super intelligent every moment of my existence, but I do feel like I have these moments that I think qualify as genius, and I don't think that that's out of reach for any person at all whatsoever. It has nothing to do with IQ. What it has to do with is knowing your fundamental purpose, to be in touch with your true will, and to understand why you're here. One of the great benefits of this from a practical point of view is that it streamlines your focus, right? If you don't know why you're here and what you're doing in this ocean of chaos, it will be the authorities that form in your mind their view of reality. And if your compass is, you know, spinning wildly, somebody is going to point you in a direction and set you to task. You know, if you don't do it yourself, someone will repurpose you according to their own designs. You know, I mean, this is probably the thing that I say the most on this channel. It is definitely, without question, a crisis of purpose that has caused the chaostrophe that we're living in. It is what has made people into these malleable zombies. It is what has made people directionless. It is the reason the oceans are testing positive for Xanax, and you know, the Thames is testing positive for cocaine. It's the reason for school shootings. It's the reason why men are committing SUIC whatever algorithm at the highest rate in human history. It's the reason for all the vapid bimbos on social media. And it's the reason why social media is being used as a sort of collective pool of narcissism instead of a soul-enriching source of free information. You know, there are a lot of layers to this. And if you think about it, it's totally consistent with this idea of the higher self being the thing of fundamental importance for humanity. Because when people are disengaged from that aspect of themselves or that aspect of the universal mind, they become lost. Their life is pointless. You know, I can't imagine how you can place value on a life that is lived purposelessly, without purpose, you know? And so, just trying to remember exactly where it is that I'm at in this tale. Oh yeah, I want to show you guys something actually, and I'm gonna have to. Speaking of great minds thinking alike, Aleister Crowley, basically, you know, his message, despite whatever weirdness might have come with it, was basically that people needed to attain to their own sovereignty. That, you know, you have to discover your true will and then constrain every deed, every thought, every breath to the fulfillment of that true will. And just to clarify, this isn't necessarily like a pastime or even a profession. It's something deeper than that. It's the fundamental essence of a person. And in order to really do that well, establishing this knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel, or creating making yourself a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven, you know, those two related tasks sort of combine. And the result of that is that people know their trajectory, and the amount of conflict in human civilization is greatly reduced. The need for government is eliminated, and so on and so forth. And Carl Jung actually had a very similar, to the point of being almost suspicious, position on all of this. He referred to it as your higher self. And as I said earlier, his definition of self was that the subconscious and conscious had an interaction, and that produced this sort of yin-yang personality that was a byproduct of those two things. And the goal, basically, of individuation, it was to be able to transcend them both and get control of these hemispheres by means of integration. But it's basically the same thing. So check this out. I want to, because I went into Reddit to look around and see if anyone had noticed this. And, people were like, oh, what's his name? Jung wouldn't have had any value in Crowley's work, all this sort of thing. Let me get myself out of the way. But I'll show you this real quick. And that'll probably, oh no, I forgot I had to restart my computer here. Let me pull it up. Images. All right, so have a look at that. Right? Now, have a look at this. Liber Novus, Liber Legis, they're both red. The type set is even similar. I don't know, it kind of looks to me like Crowley was an influence on Carl Jung. Jung actually is, I think, the... proper pronunciation. Did I fix this? Where's my chat? All right. By the way, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat. Also, do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can access secret streams. Particularly, I think the Masonic Degree 28 that took 3 months. But I also wanted to take a second to thank UOU, Alpha Draconian, Chef Zone, Spiral Out, and I think that's it. All new patrons. So I really appreciate you guys. I can't tell you how meaningful it is when I wake up and find money in the Cash App or the PayPal or the Zelle or whatever, or the Patreon, and it gives me the determination to keep going despite shadow bans and, just general difficulties with YouTube. So, like the strike I got last week for absolutely no reason, that was interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about magic and the occult and meditation and psychedelics, basically, which really all go together a lot more than I think a lot of people realize. And that was actually the point of the mysteries to a large extent, and the reason for the apoptiae, or the inner circle, the keepers of the secret knowledge, the secret doctrine, having this structure and someone who had more experience to tell you when you are chasing wish demons. Even in Zen Buddhism, they have safety protocols, because when you expand your consciousness, lo and behold, things actually happen. You start to experience precognitions, which can be understood, by the way, without having to invoke woo at all, because the subconscious is pattern recognition is extraordinary. That's why, savants, and I think some people with autism can do this. But January 23rd, 1922 was a Monday. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to think about it for a split second. It's just already there. So, if you really truly establish this bridge between the subconscious and conscious mind, these patterns that have been mapped out by the subconscious emerge into the conscious mind. And that is really what precognition is, according to Maynard James Keenan from Tool, who has probably done that in the most public, the fear inoculum thing. They wrote this song about a pandemic causing people to be afraid of each other and causing all of this fear and hatred 6 months before COVID hit. And that was his answer, which is the same answer that I would give, and I'm sure that Aleister Crowley would give. Speaking of Aleister Crowley, his holy guardian angel or higher self told him, your success will be your proof, right? And that makes sense. So we have another person who focused a tremendous amount of energy in establishing this individuation or, the communication between the two hemispheres of the mind. And pretty much inarguably the only prophetical document in the history of humanity that is precise. It didn't succumb to the vagaries of Edgar Cayce and Nostradamus. It says that the new aeon will begin when the world is soaked in blood by the Great War. And in the book, Great War is capitalized. And World War I came to be called the Great War afterwards. And if you Google it, you will see that the modern era is generally considered to have been started by that war. So he wrote that in that book 10 years before the Great War created the new aeon, even according to the metrics of historians. So that's a tough one to, dismiss. And these, by the way, are the kind of standards that you really need if you're going to be a real occultist. Things need to have this level of substance, otherwise they should be dismissed outright. And that's a skill that most people that open up to spirituality and metaphysics and whatnot never acquire. And then there's also the fact that this being, Aiwass, and in case you're not aware of this, he did say that it was his holy guardian angel, and he also said that he never made up his mind whether it was just part of his psyche or like a literal, being with its own objective existence. And I think that's important to note, and it's also a very important approach, I think, to inculcate, to just be okay with the fact that you do not know what's really going on with any of this stuff and probably never will. And you just have to kind of develop a skill set to live with it and navigate it. But once you sort of collapse the probability wave into a, certainty, things can get a little bit, I think that katmas, which are relativistic meta-beliefs, are much more useful than dogmas, which are strict and unyielding. But what was I saying about this? Okay, then this being also told him to know me, take wine and strange drugs, or take wine and strange drugs and know me thereof. And now we have all these people smoking DMT and taking ayahuasca and interacting with this Pachamama creature. And this was actually said during the feminine phase of this being's, I don't know. It was like a different aspect of Rahor Kuit in each of the chapters. And then probably the most interesting one is that he said that we will know the new aeon is in full swing because people also, one of the other, fascism all over the planet, and then also people becoming more epicene and bisexual. And now, of course, we have gender fluidity. And so, my point is that the people that have established this knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel have left a pretty compelling record that there's actually something to it. I mean, the Book of the Law is pretty wild in that respect. Even the population control agenda is mentioned in there. He says, society only moves by the light of genius. The herd will be destroyed in mass. I mean, it's pretty wild stuff. The point that I'm getting at, though, is that I don't even remember what the fuck my point was. Well, I guess, that is the point, that there's this idea, that's it, throughout the history of magic and the occult, that your real objective is to connect with this sort of creative impulse to extract knowledge and information that allows you to appear to transcend the rules of ordinary reality. Because that's not what breaking the rules of creation is not what magic is for. But becoming so adept at utilizing them that what you do seems like miracles to the profane. That's more in keeping with this. And if you look around the world throughout, at least the last 100 years, I know this because if you watch old black and white cartoons, even way back then, there are references to this. When someone is incredible at something, you call them a wizard. That guy's a whiz at math. He's a whiz at this, a whiz at that. And if you think about that, really run it through your mind, there's not really an overt connection between, wizards and high intelligence or adepthood or any of that sort of stuff with the average person. But yet people seem to be almost intuitively compelled to make this connection between, genius, high-level genius, and abilities that transcend the ordinary and mundane, and associating that with wizards and genius. And I've always thought that was kind of like a remarkable circumstance, that, we see that and people don't really make the connection that the true objective of transcendental meditation and alchemy and, occult practices and shamanism and all of these things is really about accessing a transcendental state of mind that allows us to become more than human. The song 46 and 2 by Tool is about this process of transcending the limitations of our genome, basically, which brings me to this next little bit of information that I forgot again that I rebooted my computer, so let me bring this back up real quick. What was it? All right. Here it is. This is actually from a paper from the University of Tennessee. I don't see an author, called Evolution, Jung, and Theurgy. And it is, it's just part of the paper. In Jungian psychology, a special role is played by the self, which for clarity I'll call the higher self. The higher self comprehends the totality of the archetypal field, and therefore it comprises all the archetypes. Thus, the higher self comprehends the collective unconscious, and so it must be carefully distinguished from the individual conscious ego, which is just one of its organs. The higher self is the psychical correlate of the human genome, and thus it represents the phylogenetic destiny of the human species. That is, the higher self corresponds to the it has the Greek there, I have to remember. Anthropos? Yeah. The archetypal human, familiar from Gnostic and Hermetic texts. The higher self brings transpersonal meaning and purpose into our lives and defines the providence, and this is interesting because one of the things that I have talked about that happens, a lot of people talk about this, it's not like it's like my idea or something, but I use the term pronoia as opposed to, Why isn't my camera tracking? Paranoia. Yeah, is it blurry? You guys see that? Like it's just not tracking my face. It's getting on my nerves. Anyways, pronoia as opposed to paranoia. And the idea basically is that, once you are aware of your own fundamental true will and you have started to act in accordance with it, and then you hopefully organically find yourself in alignment with the collective well-being. And so you are swept along by forces greater than your own will and your own fate and destiny because you have aligned yourself with this collective mind. And so you find yourself supported by the universe in all kinds of remarkable ways. If you've lived on the edge like I have my entire life, and you found yourself completely out of options and totally fucked countless times, and something just always happens. Especially the more you are in alignment with your purpose and you know what I mean? It's pronoia. And I didn't realize this until today, but the Greek word for providence is pronoia. It's spelled pronoia. That's not exactly the pronunciation, but it's spelled exactly pronoia, providence. You can't make this stuff up, Last defines the pronoia governing all humans. Further, as we have seen, behind the personified archetypes are the more remote, unpersonified archetypal ideas corresponding to natural and mathematical law. These too are part of the higher self and therefore constitutive of our destiny. To live meaningful, significant lives, then, we should live in conscious, intentional accord with the destiny of the universe. Jung called this lifelong process individuation because through it, a person becomes individual. Or individuous, that is, undivided, integral. As the Jungian analyst Anthony Stevens says, individuation is a conscious attempt to bring the universal program of human existence to the fullest possible expression in the life of the individual. Wisdom, then, is to be guided by the higher self. The transcendent higher self, corresponding to the genome, also has an immanent projection, and we may identify, perhaps, the immanent higher self with the personal or guardian demon, at least in some versions of the idea. The higher self also seems to be a likely candidate for Socrates. I'm not sure what this Greek word, I guess we could translate it. Socrates, probably word for higher self. Dodds argues that from the Arabic period, someone's personal daemon was virtually synonymous with their destiny. And George Luck remarked that the daimonion could be called the super-rational personality that controls the whole of our lives. And that word, daimonium, is actually where the word dominion comes from. And, I would point out at this juncture that if you haven't noticed already, all of these things that have been demonized are fundamental ideas that are connected to this process of knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, or connection with the higher self and individuation. And they are all remedies to the slave state of mind. That is not a coincidence. That is why, sometimes I go off the rails on Christianity and religion and stuff, and people kind of, everybody is so heavily indoctrinated that this stuff is good, or I don't know what it is that compels people to defend these things. But if you really look at the details, you find the devil. And it's, there's no doubt that these systems were engineered in order to circumvent and curtail this genuine spiritual development and evolution of people. Because an empowered, fully realized race that is in contact with their daemon, with their holy guardian angel and higher self and genius, is not going to tolerate being governed, and they are not in need of governance. So, you guys, this knowledge and the practices that are associated with it they couldn't be more important and more essential. And so let's continue. Jung stresses that the higher self is paradoxical and even contradictory because it comprehends all the opposites. He calls it the unus mundus, but in Neoplatonic terms, it is the inexpressible one, which unifies mind, matter, unity and plurality, stability and change, indeed being and non-being. The only way to bridge these contradictions, according to Jung, is by a symbolic process, which he calls the transcendent function. This is the basis for the essential role of symbols in theurgy. Okay, and what he's kind of hinting at here, and again, the oppressive nature of civilization is really on blast here, because the reason Jung had to pretend not to be inspired by Aleister Crowley, but look at the red book, look at it, Liber Novus, it's red, it has the same typeset, it's the same size, come on, you guys, like, give me a break, but he couldn't say that publicly. And he couldn't say alchemy. We know that he was into this stuff, but that's because his private writings have been published because he's been dead for 100 years or whatever it's been, He couldn't explicitly say this is the alchemical process in the lives of individual people. I always talk about it as replication by means of reflection, just like the Fibonacci sequence that doubles back on itself, copies a pattern or a number, you could say, and then it goes forward, and it goes back, copies, and goes forward, right? So that is how the universe created itself, and every single thing in the universe has some sort of residual or its fundamental mechanisms are expressions of this process, right? So he's talking about, how these, opposites, these contradictory things interact to produce a third thing. How exactly do you put it? Which unifies mind and matter, unity and plurality, stability and change, being and non-being. So, yeah, that's basically the alchemical process, that the interaction of these two things of opposite nature produce a third thing of a higher nature. So the experience that comes into this left eye and right eye, they leave here at a 60-degree angle, and then they have a vector here that produces a third thing of a higher nature. Really tremendously important and interesting subject matter, I think. Sorry, I was just checking the chat there. And the processes, I almost feel like it's redundant to talk about this, but I guess, we can all use reminders. And I think over the years, sifting through different, actually, that's it, flow state. My program, I guess, is that I call Flow State Lifestyle, is about engineering your life on the macro scale to incorporate as many flow state triggers as possible, because it turns out, I think, that flow state is just, in the same way that Carl Jung sort of dealt with a lot of pressure to conform to the expectations of the herd around him. He was trying to balance being a mystic and, almost a prophet or something with being a respectable scientist. And so, during his lifetime, he actually outright denied any kind of interest in the occult and alchemy and all of this sort of stuff. Just in that way, we have sort of been compelled to come up with terms for things that disguise what they actually are. And flow state is actually just another way of saying transcendental mind. If you look at what happens and the results that are produced during flow state, when musicians are improvising in a group setting, and these moments occur that would not be possible if the same musicians had consciously tried to engineer them. In particular, I'm thinking of like North Indian classical music and the Grateful Dead, where this collective improvisation, and it had to go on for 10 or 15 minutes before these moments would occur, because there has to be concentration that's akin to meditation. And what you realize is that what you're actually describing is access to the holy guardian angel or higher self via reliable methods of contact for that entity, whatever it is. And so what I realized about my own life is that the reason that I had been in such consistent contact with that part of myself or whatever it is that, rather than having certain activities where I would enter into flow state, my life was kind of built around it. And so here I pulled up the wrong file here. There we go. Curiosity, passion, and purpose, right? So in my own life, I was absolutely fixated on this one thing, and there are different aspects to it. So I could, constrain my studies in physics to this purpose. I could use music, and it compelled me to study philosophy and psychoactive plants. And so, it's not exactly narrow-mindedness, but the end result, if you are truly committed and you have constrained your will to this singular purpose, everything you do is constrained to this purpose. And that is kind of a key to why it makes life meaningful. If you have a purpose that is meaningful to you, absolutely, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. Nothing is mundane, because every single thing you do, if it's your job, organizing your belongings and cleaning your house, if you have purpose in your life, then all of the activities that you engage in are concretions in the structure of this ultimate goal, or accretions, excuse me. So see what I'm saying there? That is a massive thing to understand, that the main reason that this kind of thinking is the path to peace and what is the word for, contentment and happiness, all of that sort of stuff. Passion, purpose, curiosity, autonomy. Right? I mean, I worked for someone else for like 2 years. I'm 44 years old. If you had a world full of illuminated people, do they need to be told what to do? They don't steal, they don't rob, they don't kill. So that autonomy is a byproduct of this process. And the reality is that if you are pursuing your will with 100% conviction, every single time anyone interferes with your orbit, they fucked you up. It's a dissonance pattern. It's an interference pattern. And you need to be a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven. And the way that you do that is by having, your clarity and your focus and your self-determination fully intact. So if you're really committed to living your true purpose, you can't really be taking orders from people. And if you've been successful in the sort of preparatory phases of, psychedelics and breath work and all of this other stuff, you don't have necessity to be told what to do. So novelty, right? Experiencing new things. If you are left to your own devices and you have freedom to pursue your interests, you're going to encounter new experiences on a daily basis. I can't tell you how many things I've done in the last 2 weeks that I have never done in the 44 years of my life. I mean, this giant monkey with a bald red head jumped on our heads the other day. Well, I mean, almost, there's like a chain link fence above, and the short will be published, I think, on Sunday. You guys can check it out. But, it just comes with the territory when you have your independence and autonomy that you will encounter new experiences constantly. Complexity kind of goes hand in hand with that. Unpredictability and surprise, complete concentration. And now this is one of the key macro triggers, because, when you are meditating or you're playing an instrument and you focus completely on that thing and you enter into a transcendental state. And it is true that it's like being possessed, by the way. I've had moments where I was playing guitar and I would literally give a command to my hand to play this riff. I even remember the one that stood out the most. I was playing Casey Jones by the Grateful Dead, and I went to play the main riff, and my hand was like, nah, and it went off down the other end of the guitar and played something completely different. It was a lot better. But it literally just suddenly had a mind of its own. But what I'm getting at here is that these, activities like music and something's growling, meditation are like micro triggers. If you are focused on a singular purpose day in, day out, you're always thinking about it, your entire life becomes a prolonged meditation. And then you're in flow state all the time. Maybe not all the time, but much more often than would be otherwise normal. And so you have access to higher levels of intelligence, cognitive pyrotechnics, and greater creativity, and all of it. So that's a huge one. The reason that constraining your entire being to one singular purpose is that now your entire life is one long meditation. Clear goals, challenge to skill ratio, just looking to see if there's anything else that's really challenge to skill ratio is also really important. And if you are living free and you have your autonomy and your courage is developing, and you don't have that mentality that you are below anyone on the totem pole, not above them either necessarily, you're definitely going to find yourself in engaging in activities that are you're going to put your target for skill set beyond what a person who may be more subjugated and domesticated would. You're going to shoot for the stars and maybe land on the moon, as opposed for just aiming for the top of a hill somewhere. Deep embodiment is another flow state trigger that, just sort of, I don't really need to go into it because it is implied by all of these other things. Creativity and pattern recognition. Pattern recognition. Remember how we were talking about it resulting in precognition? That is definitely something to take note of. It's one of the reasons why I really advocate for everyone to learn to play an instrument. If you don't sing or drum or play guitar or piano or something, I don't think you're whole. I don't think that I don't think it's proper and healthy for anyone to not incorporate some kind of musical expression into their life. And part of that has got to do with pattern recognition, but also ambidextrous activities where you are engaging both sides of the brain, and you have to make, your strumming hand has to be precise and target, certain notes and strings, but your other hand is dealing with harmony and melody. And so, you are sort of multitasking, but the sum total of it is one thing, so I can't imagine living life without that. But any of these activities that give us greater access to the subconscious are going to increase our pattern recognition. And it's a really remarkable thing to experience what happens when you consistently access transcendental states of mind, and you notice synchronicities increase, which actually are a form of pattern recognition, in my opinion, because what it is there's like super sensibles. It is an awareness of higher orders of symmetry. You basically create a bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind, and so there is an awareness of the homeostasis or symmetry that extends or connects your inner experience and your external experience. I think that's really the mechanism behind that. So, the increase in synchronicities is part of the pattern recognition. Precognitions, all of these things increase. Oh, earlier I started talking about the cities and the Zen Buddhists, and I never finished that. That's where I was going with that is that, the masters would tell the students to ignore the cities because you don't want to pursue these wish demons and whatnot and be distracted by the precognitions and whatever. That doesn't really relate to what we're talking about now, but somehow I just realized that 20 minutes ago I had started talking about the cities and the Zen Buddhists and didn't actually finish the story. So there you go if you've been around for that long. So pattern recognition, it's interesting when we talk about group flow triggers as well, having shared goals and engaging in close listening, having a sense of control, blending egos, equal participation. That's all sounds like the Grateful Dead's recipe for collective improvisation and accessing a transcendental mind in that way. But they actually recognized observing it in basketball. And so that's why they would go to, and constant communication. In fact, one time I was actually talking to the bass player from the Grateful Dead, Phil Lesh, at his club in San Rafael. And I asked him, look me dead in the eyes, Phil, is the telepathy thing real? And of course I already knew the answer to that, but I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. I'm like, it's not just marketing. And he said, it is absolutely, definitely real. And you have to be listening in a way that it transcends, the kind of listening you do with your ears. So that is that. And, I think that is all really useful and helpful advice to try to contextualize, what it means to have flow state triggers in macro so that your entire life becomes transcendental. And if you guys join my Patreon, there are opportunities to sign up for Windows of Time, for flow state lifestyle consultations. And everyone has responded to them extraordinarily well. Some of the clients have been with me for a year, year and a half, and their lives look nothing like they did prior to starting this journey with me as their guide. And the thing is, I'm not talking about financial. It could include that, but I'm talking more specifically about being content with your life and having the confidence to live it on your own terms. That's really the fundamental thing here. That is the big first step that we all need to take. It was really remarkable to me, actually, to find that paper on Jung's definition of the higher self, because so much of that I had just come to these conclusions through my own experience of these types of things. And I think that when it comes to this type of spirituality, you might call it scientific illuminism. It's irrelevant to notice that we generally define reality by consensus. And although that can be a mistake in a lot of circumstances, I think that when it comes to the spiritual and the metaphysical, it's actually extremely useful to bear that in mind. And there's a huge difference between mimicry and adopting beliefs on faith and what I'm talking about here. This is a path to knowledge and understanding and perception that is totally based on having catalyzed organic experiences and derived knowledge via experience, and arriving at the same conclusions as people like Jung and Aleister Crowley and others. Pretty much anyone that effectively catalyzes these processes in themselves ends up with the same type of experiences, because it's real and it works. And any type of desired change can be affected by the application of the proper kind and degree of force through the proper medium to the proper object. And if you fulfill those requirements, then you will have success in every case, including contacting the higher self. The chat is maniacal. I can't make any sense of it. If you guys have any questions or comments for me, I'm probably going to wrap up pretty soon, but I'll give you guys a few minutes to throw things out there. And of course, you guys have no excuse at this point. You have access to all the literature. You know what you need to be reading. You know what you need to be doing. You know what you need to be smoking or not smoking, or drinking or not drinking. At this point, we all have a very clear understanding, I think, of what our mission is and how it is accomplished. And so, I think for a lot of us, it's really just a matter of finding the courage and the discipline and the willpower, because the most complete set of talents and virtues is totally useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. And one thing that I guess I did kind of gloss over here is that in my case, not having a guide and kind of other than my internal guide, which I didn't take myself seriously enough to listen to, if that makes sense. You have to deal with your trauma and your baggage and all of that stuff before any of this is useful to you, really. And that's not really something that most people want to hear. And I think maybe I was a little bit too arrogant or something to really think that applied to me. I think I was kind of aware of it. But in my own case, I think my self-esteem and self-worth issues, even well after I realized that this voice that guided me was legitimately, it had proven its ability to give information and insight that no human being could have over and over and over again. But because it was part of me and I hadn't dealt with my self-sabotaging issues and I had not developed my self-esteem and whatnot to the extent that I needed to, I was not able to take it seriously enough to follow its instruction. And, so and then also there are a lot of tricks that we're capable of playing on ourselves. We can deceive ourselves in innumerable ways. And I think I thought that because I had established this knowledge and conversation and, so many remarkable sort of occult manifestations and whatnot, I overestimated the extent to which I was healed. I thought that because I had become aware of my self-sabotage, that meant it no longer existed, and that can be true. This is the old fairy tale theme of like the kids realize that the witch has cast a spell and that's enough for them to break the spell. That's basically the idea of psychotherapy, right? But, when you have lifelong and very deep neural networks that are working against you that were established as a child and reinforced over years and years and years and years and years, and even once the influences that created them have dissipated and ceased to have influence over you, you still have these neural networks that have replaced those influences and have you trapped in this mind-forged manacles, in these mind-forged manacles. He's asking, how do you communicate with the secret chiefs that Robert Anton Wilson mentions? Well, one thing you can do is listen to the album Secret Chiefs by Zorn, the John Zorn, Secret Chiefs 3. Every one of those songs is basically an invocation of some kind of consciousness, and it's pretty remarkable. But the Secret Chiefs, for those of you that might not be aware, nobody's really sure what they are. It's not just Robert Anton Wilson. He probably read about them in Aleister Crowley's work. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Freemasons have a version of this. But the idea is that there's some kind of intelligence, and Crowley said they may or may not be physical human beings, but they basically influence the secret societies that actually control the world. So there are like individuals that are sort of like adepts. And as far as how you would contact them, you don't contact them. They contact you, or you're not going to find them and contact them. If this is a real phenomena, you don't find them. You're not going to find them. It looks like my camera is going to die at any moment, and when it does, I'm just going to allow that to be the end. Please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, join my Patreon. We are almost to $600 a month. My goal is 2K. We have 45 more days to get there. So if you like this content and you would like to learn more about this type of stuff, Patreon is a great place to do that, and you can also sign up for blocks of FaceTime. That's really my favorite thing about this job, is interacting with individuals, because it actually helps me to an extent, to have to articulate things and solve problems and to generate insights for people on a regular basis. It really sort of keeps me sort of invigorated and Yeah, I mean, it's my favorite aspect of what I do, working one-on-one with individuals. I was almost considering like firing up the guitar and doing a late night music stream too, but I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. Well, I appreciate all of you guys as well. It has been a really intense couple of months, and this community has definitely come through for me, as always. So I definitely do appreciate you guys. But my ass is starting to hurt because I'm sitting on this like terrible wooden stool, and I think I'm over it. So I hope this has been a benefit to you guys. Don't forget that I am going to feed all of this stuff into ChatGPT and get it organized and edited and put it into a single book. And so there goes my battery. And thank you guys so much, and hit the like button, share, subscribe, and I will see you soon.